Hey everybody, and thank you to this next episode of Industrial Souls. And this episode, I'm pleased to have with me Steve Lerch from Story Art Consulting. Steve has a super interesting backstory. Having worked in Google, he's also an expert in helping companies do the right thing with paid ads, and a professional speaker. So he's got a lot of different things going on there. I know you'll find this conversation interesting, informative, and inspiring. So hang on, because things are about to get industrial. Hey, Steve. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me. You've got some intense intro music. It's like I was grooving over here, but it was also, like I said, it's intense.
It's funny because like almost every guest comments on the intro with the music. It's a little hardcore, I guess, but it brings some energy, I hope.
It captures attention, I guess.
Yeah, and plus it's an industrial focused, audience, so kind of like the industrial-ish music. I feel like
it's cool. I liked it.
Plus, I dig it. Yeah. So who cares what anybody else thinks? But thank you.
Perfect.
Yeah. So, hey, for you people listening out there in TV land, I just want to tell you that if you want to comment, feel free to do so, especially if you're watching this now live on LinkedIn. So just drop a comment in the comments. I love to hear from people, what they're thinking. And if you have a question, throw it in there and we'll try to get to it. But you're also welcome just to say hi. So anyways, as I said earlier, my guest with us today is Steve Lerch, and Steve is an expert in pay-per-click marketing, especially with Google. Used to be on the Google side of pay-per-click marketing, now helps companies do their thing on pay-per-click marketing. But that's my version of your backstory. Why don't you tell everybody what your version of your backstory is and how did we get here today?
Sure. My version of my backstory. So I worked at Google for about 10 years. That was most of my professional career. My first job out of college. I had sort of two gigs while I was there, sort of different versions of two gigs. The main thing I did during those 10 years was helping different businesses in different industries, different sizes with their digital strategy, especially as it related to paid marketing. So anything Google Ads related, certainly. I was consulting on that stuff, selling that stuff, advising that stuff, but also as that branches out to consumer analytics, creative strategy, web strategy, really anything related to an organization's digital strategy. And like I said, I worked across a lot of different sizes of companies, a lot of different industries. I started in the technology space, working with consumer electronics manufacturers, so clients like GoPro and OtterBox. I spent some time working with the federal government, with nonprofits, with trade associations, all sorts of different stuff. I said I kind of had two gigs when I was at Google. The other thing I did at Google was that I taught or I gave presentations to large groups of new employees, primarily about sort of Google's philosophy and culture as it relates to innovation, as it relates to how Google prioritizes new ideas, new ways of thinking, new approaches, embracing change. So I would give those presentations, train what we called nooglers, new employees at Google. So it was kind of the side hustle, or the 20% project, as we would call it at Google. And again, I was there for about 10 years. I left Google 6 years ago to go out on my own, still doing a lot of that digital strategy, marketing, as you said, paid per click advertising, consulting with all sorts of different companies in different industries. But also one of the main reasons I left Google is because I wanted to pursue a career giving speeches. I get my keynote speaker. I'll give 40 or 50 speeches all over the country and sometimes all over the world on either that sort of marketing digital strategy topic, that innovation topic that I used to teach while I was at Google. And increasingly now, as I think all keynote speakers are doing in 2025, I'm giving speeches on AI. So I've given 15 or so artificial intelligence speeches because every speaker seems to need to have a POV on AI right now. So that's kind of what I do since leaving Google. It's giving those speeches and continuing to help organizations that I find interesting with their digital strategy or their paid media. I guess that's my version of my background. Does that make sense?
It does. Yeah, totally. And I think the speaking part is a little bit of an outside of the box nugget here, which I want to drill into just a little.
It's a weird job.
It's cool. I actually enjoy public speaking too, not to the degree that you do. But like previously in other conversations we have had, you have mentioned like the speaking part has really taken off for you. Like, I don't know, what would you say has been a key factor for your success on the speaking side? I know, just keep in mind, a lot of people who will be watching this are content producers of various kinds. And, public speaking is like, kind of the original content,
right?
Yeah, so
go back to the cavemen telling stories, I guess, in their caves or warning people about, I don't know, pterodactyls or whatever. Yeah, it's a blast. I love doing it. I know not everyone relates to that feeling. As you and I enjoy speaking, most people hate it. I know people have always said that public speaking is like the number one fear. The people list and death third, meaning if you were at a funeral, you'd rather be in the coffin than giving the eulogy. I've heard that many, many times. But yeah, I've always enjoyed giving presentations, always enjoyed speaking. I spoke at my high school graduation, college graduation. I competed in public speaking competitions, debate. I did plays. So I always enjoyed telling stories. I always enjoyed being on stage. So in the rare instances I got to give speeches at Google, which was not very common, I always really enjoyed it. And through a various number of circumstances, I saw an opportunity to see if I could make a career out of it, see if I could make money out of it by leaving Google. But it's such an interesting space. You asked sort of, I guess, why it's starting to take off for me. And the takeoff is relative, I suppose. Like I said, I think I did about 50 speeches last year, but that was up a good chunk from the previous years. So, so much of speaking is word of mouth. And it's, I don't know what percentage of my speeches comes from someone who was in one of my audiences, but everybody's interconnected. And if you're friendly and you network and you do a good job up on stage, chances are there's someone in the audience of that event who knows somebody at this trade association or at this company who's planning an offsite or a board meeting, and they just need an outside perspective. So, I've been very fortunate to have a lot of people pass my name around and recommend me, but I think, or at least I'd like to think that my topics are, I don't want to say universal, but I think they're adaptable to a lot of different spaces. So, I talk a lot about innovation, and my perspective on innovation, despite working at Google for 10 years, I'm not a technical person at all. I'm not an engineer. I don't know how to code. So when I talk about innovation, and even when I taught innovation at Google, it was very much from the framework of sort of the people side. How do we as leaders facilitate innovation from our teams? How do we as contributors gather feedback in meaningful ways? How do we test? How do we get open-minded? How do we become more flexible? And I think audiences have enjoyed, at least I like to think they've enjoyed hearing from someone who came from a place like Google, super high tech, big budgets, engineers, but talks about innovation in a very practical human way that anybody can copy. It's similar to when I talk about artificial intelligence now. I think, I've been doing this for a while, and I've seen a lot of AI speeches. I've got a lot of feedback on my speeches and others. There's a lot of people out there right now telling stories about how AI is going to change the world and what 2030 is going to look like. And I find that interesting and fascinating. But for a lot of audiences, for a lot of average business leaders, average business owners, what do they take from that and what do they do with that? When I talk about AI, I say at the beginning, I don't know what 2030 is going to look like. And frankly, all I can tell you for sure is there's going to be more AI and it's going to be better using it more. So all I want to do as a speaker and as a person, a business owner myself, I want to start getting comfortable with it. So when I talk about AI, it's how can you leave this conference or event and tomorrow get on ChatGPT or whatever it is and use it in better, smarter, and more efficient ways. What questions should you be asking? What prompts should you be giving to do whatever your job is right now a little better and a little faster and a little more efficient? So I think a big part of it for me is trying to find narratives I can share that relate to what people really need, and figuring out whether an audience is looking, or an event is looking, to get inspired or entertained or educated on a thing, whether that's AI innovation, the marketing stuff that I've been doing for years and years. So yeah, I think some of it's luck. I think some of it's doing a good job and getting word of mouth. I think some of it's tailoring speeches so that they're applicable to different audiences. I mean, I've talked about innovation to groups of farmers, like at the Utah Farm Bureau, and I've talked it to a group of 50 insurance agency CEOs. And it's customized a little bit, but in a lot of ways, the stuff I'm talking about relates to anyone. So yeah, I guess that's kind of how I think of it. But I always attribute a good chunk of anything that goes well in my life. I attribute at least some of it to luck. So I take that in stride as well.
I got to point out the irony of an ex-Google tech guy specializing in digital marketing, in innovation, in AI, and the primary growth mechanism for your speaking business is word of mouth, which is just slightly ironic, but very cool and very telling. Honestly, it's very telling. It's one of the things that comes out often in this podcast, is that regardless of the AI, the tools, the whatever marketing, there's a lot of marketing talked about here. In the end, it really comes down to this: human beings making a connection, talking to each other, having some sort of shared experience.
And I use a lot of that, like certainly AI. I mean, I use ChatGPT or Gemini every single day, multiple times a day. And I certainly use it to help me with my business, whether that's planning for speeches. I just built like a new website. I had a website, but I just built a new one. I used ChatGPT a ridiculous amount to figure out the best ways to use Squarespace and set up Google Tag Manager. And so I'm using a lot of these things. But yeah, I don't think anything beats doing a good job. And I think in speaking, I've had instances where I'll get reached out to about, I had this a real one. I got reached out to about an event, and the event was in Quad Cities, Iowa, which is, a small town in Iowa. And I said, I've actually given a speech there before. And one of the guys on the planning call was like, yeah, I know, I was there. And that's why I recommended you for this. It was like 4.5 years ago. It was like the very beginning of my job, but something about it stuck in his head. And he didn't really have need for a speaker for another 4.5 years. But then he's in some meeting and somebody mentions they need a speaker, and something about my presentation stuck with him, fortunately for me. And he thought to throw my name out there. So yeah, like I've tried things. I've cold calls on, especially the first year of doing this. I was on LinkedIn searching for event planners and sending them messages. And I have talked a little bit, or thought a little bit, about my new website, maybe running some Google ads. I've even started to design some campaigns. I think I'll experiment a little bit with some of that stuff. But yeah, to your point, you do a good job or you don't. And, if you don't do a good job, it doesn't really matter how good your marketing is and how good your digital strategy is, or how creative you are with your AI usage. I think that stuff sort of is in the back end.
It's secondary for sure. I think a lot of times people who are in marketing, especially, we're so focused on marketing, we can forget about the humans, forget about even the product, everything that the brand or whatever supposedly stands for, that's not marketing, but is real experience. But it's those things, really, fundamentally, those have to be there. Otherwise, you can't market or pay-per-click your way out of a crap situation. It's just, I've
heard a lot of people, I know it's I think a cliche saying too, but it's true, where people say the best like marketing asset you can possibly have is a good product, like a good product to market. I mean, it doesn't, not that you can't do really creative, brilliant things with marketing and digital strategy. I love trying to find those things, but yeah, if the product sucks, it's only going to last so long.
Yeah. You're never going to get to a customer to buy again if it's a crappy experience,
For sure. Same with speeches, right?
Yeah, exactly. One thing you talked about a lot already is innovation. And I know that's a speaking topic of yours. So I'm really curious what you would say. So say a group of manufacturers around the topic of how they could better embrace an innovative mindset in either in manufacturing or
Yeah.
marketing or sales or in any way, without giving away too much of one of your presentations, what's
That's
one
fine.
little tidbit that you would throw out there?
Sure. Yeah, I think, I mean, there's a lot of, obviously there's so many things spinning in my mind because I talk about this stuff all the time, and I have lots of stories and lots of principles. And one thing I talk about a lot with, especially when I work with leadership teams of different organizations, board meetings, things like that, but also just at broader conferences, is really about the concept that there's a lot of creativity and new ideas and sources of inspiration and outside the box thinking that already is existing somewhere in somebody's head. And that most organizations I've worked with are failing to do enough to go find those things, to go bring those ideas out of people. They're not
Mm,
collecting enough feedback. They're not empowering their employees enough. I said this a lot. I share some stories from Google and um, Walmart and Frito-Lay and all these places, these stories of people who came out of nowhere, let's say, with some really impactful idea. And I'll share these stories, and I talk about how, ideas are currency and they should transcend silo and job title. And of course, that sounds well and good. But at most companies, your 22-year-old kid you just hired out of school and is like the lowest level employee at your company, who's only been there a month, for most people like that, if they've got some, let's say, outside the box thought that's maybe not related to the scope of their work, or it's for some other team or some other product that they don't work on, but they've got some cool idea or some good, interesting question,
mhm.
most of them aren't going to share that sort of thing. They're just not. They're going to sit on it. That happens all the time. Good ideas are wasted because they sit in people's heads. And it's on leaders to sort of set the tone for organizations and set the tones for themselves as leaders to say, we want that. We want you to ask the question. We want you to share the idea. We want you to give the feedback. It sounds simple, but it doesn't natively happen. People
No.
take for granted that, like, you say to yourself, if I had a good idea, I'd share it. First of all, you're probably kidding yourself if you were the lowest level employee, but you also don't speak for everybody. And again, it's your employees, it's your customers. And even, like, I say this a lot to people, your friends and your family. And it sounds weird to think that, like, you're manufacturing some complicated widget. And let's say your husband or wife is like an elementary school teacher. It seems weird to think that, like, you're going to get ideas for your business from them. But I think people would be surprised, leaders should be surprised if they spend more time talking about their business, talking about the challenges of their business, the
Yeah.
manufacturing, the people management. We're having issues with recruiting, with accounting, with HR, with advertising. Spending time talking about that stuff to your friends, your family, posting it on social media, that just opens up your sort of universe of potential support, of ideas, of inspiration, so much broader. I think that's, like, kind of the first step to building a more innovative team or culture, is like asking for help and getting louder about the things you're trying to do, and
Wow,
making
that's
sure
interesting.
that if ideas exist, they make it to you. Again, it sounds obvious, but it doesn't just happen unless you take steps.
Yeah, that's actually super fascinating. Like the first step is being open about your challenges and essentially asking for help,
Yeah.
being a first step in innovation. I think that's actually a fascinating insight. So thanks
And
for
it can be
sharing that.
easy. Like, there's an awesome story, and it's funny because it's, I don't know, funny story. It's kind of debated, like, all the details of this, but it was they recently made a movie about it. But I've been telling this story for years, and it's about this janitor at Frito-Lay, where it's like the '80s. The basically Frito-Lay wasn't doing well. The CEO sent out a video to, like, the whole company, and in the video he was basically saying, we're not doing that well, and I want you all to care as much as I do. I want this to feel like your company too. I want you to bring all of yourself to work. If you've got ideas, I want to hear them. And that video gets distributed, and this janitor at one of the Frito-Lay factories in California sees it. And he's, the son of Hispanic immigrants. He doesn't really speak English that well, or at least he didn't, never finished high school, like, say he's a janitor. And he's got an idea, and he decides to share it. And in my speeches, I tell this a little more long form or poetically. But
Yeah.
long story short, his idea was to make, like, a spicier snack food that matched, like, Hispanic taste buds. And eventually the CEO takes his phone call, takes a meeting with him, and it leads to Flaming Hot Cheetos, which is, like, one of the most popular snacks in America for the last decade. And like, what the CEO did wasn't that hard. It just was like recording a video saying, like, I'm here to help. I'm here for help. I'm here to listen. I don't have all the answers. And that humility, that when one of your lowest level employees calls you on the phone and says, I saw your video, got an idea, to take that phone call and to take that
Yeah.
meeting. Like, it doesn't have to be a lot of work, but it's possible the idea you get from it could be huge. And there's tons of stories like that. I won't tell this one too, but there's also one from Walmart about a warehouse worker who invented like a new step ladder. And when it got to the Walmart CEO, they decided it's going to save them $30 million a year by like putting this in all their warehouses. Like it's these little things that are already in people's heads that we don't know what we're missing.
Yeah. Wow, that's fascinating. That's a really cool take. So say you're a guy or girl, guy or gal who's in some organization and you want to see that kind of change happen above you. Okay. Yeah. Because a lot of people are in this situation, right? You're the one, you want that guy to hear what
you make changes from the top for sure.
Yeah. What would you say to that person?
Yeah, I think one thing I would say is that small victories are a great way to build momentum to bigger changes. And I think a lot of times when I talk about innovation, I get asked questions of like, in my company, we can't take those risks. We don't have the time or the money. You can do things that are innovative, that are outside the box, that are new, that are safe, that are small, that seem like some of the coolest innovations. The ones I appreciated most is when someone looks at like their routine day-to-day tasks that they've been doing the same way for 5 years, and the employee before them in the role did it that way for 5 years, and then realizing, you know what, it would actually be a little more efficient if instead of having our weekly staff meetings on Tuesday at 3:00, we had them on Monday at 1:00 for whatever reason. And it sounds like a very small thing, but if it has an impact and it's positive, it's worth doing. And I think celebrating those small little victories we have and putting them in the framework of, hey, we questioned a thing that was in place and we found a better way to do it. I think finding those small victories, celebrating them, sharing them, and encouraging not even your leaders, but your other peers to think around those same ways, to try to do those things. Again, I worked at Google for a decade. I've said this many times. I think one of the more impactful things I ever did was finding a new way to like bookmark this part of the internal Google Ads system and sharing it with people, because it saved everyone I shared it with a few minutes every day. But that adds up when you share it with dozens or hundreds or thousands of people. It's this silly little thing, but it mattered, right? So I think like finding those small victories and celebrating them. But I would also, if you're comfortable with it, challenge your leaders on this. Like, I can't imagine you would go to a leader at your company and say, hey, I heard this podcast and they were talking about how we need to share more ideas or whatever. Are you cool with that, CLO? Are you cool with that if we start bringing you more ideas, or can we create a format to share more ideas? I can't imagine them saying no. And sometimes silly things like setting up a Shark Tank contest or whatever for new ideas, a pitch contest. Sometimes those things are really fun ways to start a cultural shift or to start a cultural change. And I think any person at a company, the day-to-day low-level person, could start an idea like that, pitch an idea like that. Like, hey, it's one day, it's 1 hour, we're going to do this little pitch competition. It goes well, you hear some cool ideas, and suddenly the execs are thinking, wow, we need to tap into these people a little more. So those sorts of things, start small, ramp it up, share big, do something fun, do something interesting, do something buzzy like a competition. I think there's a lot of ways like that to hopefully get it started.
Yeah, those are actually super cool ideas. Hey, again, if you're listening out there and you want to comment, I know you're out there. I can see you. So just throw a comment in the comments, say hi if you want. Another question for you, Steve, would be, what is your why, so to say, or what is the thing that is the reason why you have a passion for the things that you're passionate in? What is it about either speaking or helping businesses below the surface, like down in there? What is it that drives you, I guess, into what you're doing?
It's a good question, a big question, I guess. I think, not to be like overly corny, but I certainly like helping people, or even helping might not be the word. I like having an impact on people, right? Like I gave an AI speech recently at a conference out in Vegas for people in the rental industry who, whether that's you have a business that rents chairs for weddings or rents gigantic tractors to farms or trucks or whatever it is. I talked about how you could use AI to write descriptions of products. I showed this example of, I just pulled the serial code for this boom lift off of some rental website, this massive crane thing. I pasted it into ChatGPT and I said, write a user guide for this product. And of course it did, because ChatGPT is awesome. And then I like redid it in a few different ways. I was like, rewrite this for someone who doesn't even know what a boom lift is, and just showed the audience sort of how it changes and customizes. I finished the speech, had some conversations. 15 minutes later, as I was leaving, this guy came up to me and he said, ever since your talk, I've been sitting out here on my phone writing product descriptions for things on our website. He said, it's taking me like 2 minutes to do, and it usually takes us 3 hours to do. And we have 3,000 products we need to write descriptions for. He's
Right.
like, and it's like, this is going to change my business. Like, that's like the coolest feedback I've gotten. Some people say some very kind things about speeches. That guy in 5 minutes went and changed his business because of some silly example I shared was the coolest thing in the world to me. And sometimes it's sharing practical advice like that. Sometimes on the innovation side, or it's a little more motivational or inspirational, talking about what's possible with people. But
Right.
anytime I feel like I can have an impact on somebody or somebody's company, it feels really like a blessing. And I think, what I do now, I'm fortunate to I speak at these conferences, sometimes in front of a couple thousand people. Sometimes it's 50 people. Sometimes it's 2,000.
Yeah.
The opportunity to reach so many people is really cool. And I hope I have a ripple effect on a lot of people. From a more like, I don't know if it's selfish, but a less deep standpoint, I really, really love a good story. And I love finding a good story that I can share. I love finding a good story and figuring out what lessons I can pull from it. I love creating a good story myself out of bits of data or trends that I see. I tell my wife all the time, like, I'll come up to her and say, I got this new bit that I'm like so excited about. It's about Subaru, and it's about how everybody thinks they're the most environmentally friendly, but nobody knows why. Like, I do some of my marketing speeches now, and I ask the room, I say, who do you think's the most environmentally friendly car company? And I give them like 10 brand logos. And I say, on the count of three, everybody yell it out. Everybody yells Subaru every time. And then I go to the people who yelled Subaru and I say, okay, tell me about their carbon emissions per year and no one has any idea. And we go back to this idea, but it feels like Subaru's the right answer. And I'll ask, why does it feel like it? And it's because literally people say, well, their commercials always have like dogs in it. And like, what a weird extrapolation. But yes, that's right. And that's true. And like, so you can see I'm getting excited and I'm ranting about this thing no one cares about Subaru.
No, it's cool.
Piecing together an interesting story. And then like, what's the lesson and what's the takeaway that a marketer can apply or a business can apply?
Yeah.
So yeah, I love having an impact on people. I love telling stories. And I think even the consulting work, the marketing work I do, I look at it the same way. I look at marketing as telling a story. I look at my consulting as coming in for maybe for a month, maybe for years, and having an impact on someone's business from the outside with the things I've learned in my travels. So yeah, does that answer? Does that make sense?
It totally makes sense.
Okay,
it's clear like you have a passion to help people, and you actually like the craft also. Sometimes just liking the craft is enough to make you want to do it. But when you can do that, and then you can combine it with something that helps people that you feel good about, obviously that's a huge motivator, and it's shared by a lot of guests, something like that. Vicky chimes in saying she loves the Shark Tank competition idea. So maybe that'll be happening over at Helix. I don't know. But
the one thing I'll say on this topic, just real quick, just because I feel like the reason you know me or where we met was more related to marketing and digital ads and pay-per-click. Just to throw in something for the marketing side, what I get excited, what's exciting for me there, I think I'm also a very analytical person. I like numbers. I like patterns. I like data. I like seeing how it fits together. I think good digital marketing, all the creative is great and viral videos are great. Good fundamental digital marketing is like putting together a puzzle. It's like
it is
very strategically layering things together that go together, and then looking at data and figuring out how to move those pieces around. It's a little different from the storytelling thing, but I guess there's still putting a puzzle together with a story. But I also really love that on the digital marketing side. I love big, creative, funny, viral stuff, but I also love like the back end in the weeds of figuring out how will these keywords branch into different search terms, and how does that match to the ad group structure. And so that just gets me excited too. It's like a fun, like I said, a puzzle.
Well, just to go one more deeper on the digital marketing, then, if for the industrial audience, what's one common mistake you see industrial people making in their digital marketing?
I think some of them Well, and some of these mistakes probably aren't even exclusive to people in the industrial space. I think these are common things. I
Sure.
think sometimes we move too fast, and that also means sometimes giving up too fast. I think, Google is certainly my expertise. I've done plenty of Meta and LinkedIn and TikTok and other platforms, but Google is my area of expertise. There's so much to it. And I see a lot of businesses move quick, throw a bunch of things in there. They're targeting way too broadly. They're spending too much money. It's not strategic enough. It's not sophisticated enough. And that yields bad performance. And then the bad performance is interpreted as, well, this doesn't work. Like, this
Right.
doesn't work for us. We shouldn't be running these types of ads. We shouldn't be using this types of strategy. You can have so much explicit control over digital marketing. Exactly who you want to see the ad for, the exact amount of money you want, say the exact thing you want, take it to the exact page you want. How much of that you can get, if you get real specific, that's another question. You might, if you could build the most perfect digital strategy in the world, and because it's so specific, you can only show your ads to 10 people a day, but those 10 people a day would be perfect, man.
Right.
So I think, like, don't give up too quickly. Take your time, put one piece after another, one footstep after another. I think running digital advertising can be simple. It doesn't have to be crazy hard, but the setup process, the first steps, you got to get right. You need the right architecture. You need the right foundation. You can't build on a bad foundation. It'll never end up right.
Right.
So I think I see that sometimes in the industrial space, where sort of sometimes consumer facing or direct to consumer, even if that consumer is a business buyer, I feel like digital marketing is less common because we rely more on our salespeople. We rely more on our leads. I think digital marketing is a really powerful tool in this space because we can identify those really specific audiences. So I would just say, industrial people, don't give up on it. Find a way to make it work for you, because it can. I promise it can.
Good. Super encouraging words to close out on. So thank you for that. Steve, if people want to get a hold of you, which I know they will after hearing this interview, what should they do?
Sure. I guess, well, like I said, I got two websites now. I got a website for speaking stuff, speeches, facilitating workshops, that sort of thing. It is stevelerch.com. Super simple. It's my name, stevelerch.com. If you are more interested in consulting stuff, marketing and that sort of thing, I've got another website called storyarcconsulting.com. But you can also find, they're linked to each other. You can find them. You can Google me. You can find my LinkedIn. But reach out, send me a message. They both have lead forms. You can send me a note. I'm happy to chat about any of this stuff at any time, or find me on LinkedIn. That's the social network I use the most. But I appreciate it. Happy to chat.
Steve, thanks for joining us today. Everybody out there, thanks for tuning in, and we will see you next time for the next episode of Industrial Stools. Until then, we'll see you out there.